I've been thinking about something. Being misunderstood is a different kind of loneliness, because it's not always the loneliness of physically being alone. Sometimes you can be surrounded by people, talking, laughing, existing in the same spaces, and still feel like no one actually sees you. And I think that's what makes it such a strange feeling. Because outwardly, everything can look normal, but internally, you feel disconnected. Like there's a version of you that never fully reaches other people. And I think what hurts about being misunderstood is the distance it creates. Not physical distance, emotional distance. The feeling of constantly translating yourself, trying to explain what you mean, how you feel, why something matters to you, hoping that eventually something will click. And sometimes it does, but other times, no one's seen that before. Like your words arrived, but you didn't. And after a while, you start questioning yourself. Am I expressing myself badly? Am I expecting too much? Am I just difficult to understand? But I don't think that's always the truth, because let me be real for a second. Constantly explaining yourself is exhausting, especially when you feel deeply, especially when you already spend so much time reflecting internally. And I think eventually you reach a point where you stop being such a hard worker. You just stop trying hard, not because you don't care, but because you're tired of shrinking your complex feelings into simplified explanations people can digest easily. You get tired of translating your depth into something more comfortable for other people. So sometimes you become quieter, not because you don't have anything to say, but because you realize being understood cannot be forced. Sometimes you become quieter, not because you have nothing to say, but because you realize that being understood cannot be forced. And honestly, that realization can feel lonely too. I started realizing something. Sometimes people don't misunderstand you because you communicate badly. Sometimes they can only understand you through the lens of their own experiences, their own awareness, their own emotional capacity, their own fears, their own limitations. And no matter how clearly you speak, people will often interpret you through who they are. And I think something I had to accept the hard way, because for a long time I kept thinking if I explain it better, maybe they'll finally understand me. But sometimes there's no perfect explanation. Sometimes the space itself just doesn't fully hold you. And I think this is where loneliness and isolation become or are two different things. Because loneliness can be painful, but isolation can also become sacred. And I had to learn that, because some of the deepest parts of myself I only discovered in isolation, in the quiet, in the moments where there was nobody around to tell me who to be, nobody projecting expectations onto me, nobody asking me to perform a version of myself. And within that space, I got to experiment, to create freely, to explore different parts of myself, to move between different art forms without overthinking it. Sometimes I'd make music, sometimes I'd build and do design work, like just spice up a space. Sometimes I just sit with ideas for hours. Sometimes I just be whatever the moment was, not because I needed validation from it, but because it genuinely made me feel alive. And I think that's the beauty people don't always talk about. Isolation can reconnect you to yourself, because when the external noise disappears, you finally hear your own voice clearly. And honestly, I think, or I feel like, being misunderstood pushed me deeper into myself. At first, it hurt, because naturally you want connection, you want resonance, you want people who understand the language of your mind and your heart. But eventually I stopped seeing solitude as rejection, and I started seeing it as space to think, space to heal, space to experiment, space to meet myself beyond the perception of what everybody else thinks is me. And I think that shift changed everything, because instead of constantly asking, why don't people understand me, I started asking, do I understand myself? Am I listening to myself, to my intuition? Am I creating a life that's actually aligned for me? And all those questions took me deeper than any external validation, ever could. And that's when something clicked for me. Being misunderstood doesn't mean you're invincible. It means you're unseen. And those are two very different things. Because invincible means you don't exist. But unseen means there are parts of you people simply don't have the capacity to perceive yet. And that realization stopped me from taking everything personally. Because not every space is built to see you, and not everyone is fully meant to understand you. And slowly, I'm learning that I do not need to exhaust myself trying to explain my existence constantly, endlessly. I don't need to reduce my depth to make other people comfortable, and I don't need every person to fully understand me for my experience to be real. Because sometimes the people who truly see you will recognize you naturally, without force, without overthinking, without performing. And honestly, that kind of connection feels different. It feels peaceful. So yeah, being misunderstood is a different kind of loneliness. But I'm also learning that solitude can become a gift, a space where you stop performing, stop over-explaining, stop abandoning yourself. And finally start listening inward. And maybe not being fully understood by everyone isn't failure. Maybe it's just a reminder that your relationship with yourself always has to come first. Just something to sit with.